Hello, 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 and good morning. I know this is a very odd time for Speaking of Happy to be going live, and it was supposed to look a little bit different than this. We were actually supposed to be live streaming from the Speaking of Happy trailer. We were headed on up to Morningside College up in Sioux City, and unfortunately, halfway there, snowstorm was happening. It wasn't supposedly happening in Sioux City, but it was happening where I was, and the road conditions were getting a little bit dicey. And so I had to turn around and come back to Omaha. So that is what I did. Drove back to Omaha, dropped the trailer off at my buddy's place, came home, set up all my stuff, and now I'm back. And my first guest joining me this morning for a conversation, what we decided to do is we wanted to connect with some folks who are going to school up there, who are part of your LGBTQ group on campus, and just have a conversation about what is the temperature like in regard to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging efforts on campus. And our first guest, as you can see, has already joined. Their name is Saline Osborne. Saline, thank you so much for hopping on with me here this morning. I wish we could have been sitting in the trailer together and having this conversation, but this works just as well. How are you this morning?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm not doing too bad after my, adventures of this morning. Woke up at
Yeah.
6, packed myself up, packed everything up in my truck, drove out to get my trailer, started heading that way. And then, I mean, the roads were just terrible. If I showed you a picture, you'd be like, wow, I can't believe that was happening. And Camry was even saying that. They were like, Camry was
Yeah.
like, it is not snowing here. It's totally clear. And I'm like, nope, it's snowing where in between.
Yeah.
So anyway, so Saline, thank you so much for joining us. If you could just give us a little bit of a background about, what is your role on campus, whether or not you're working with the campus organization, and then what you're majoring in and what you're thinking about. So go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm Saline. You can call me Sal if that's easier. I go by both. I am an English major. I'm a freshman, so I'm kind of new here on campus, and I'm a part of DOT, which is our diversity club. I work with Telethon here on campus, where we kind of call people getting support for stuff. I'm a part of theater here on campus, where you can actually kind of see on this side. We have a poster in the background for one of those. But yeah, I'm an English major with a writing emphasis, so I'm kind of going to creative writing stuff, maybe some PR stuff like that.
That's awesome. So tell me, how did you get involved with the DOT, and how long has been DOT has have they been meeting on campus?
So DOT has been meeting, I think, for 3 or 4 years now. I could be wrong on that. But when I first did my senior visit day when I was in high school, I came up and it was around this time of the year, so Transgender Remembrance Week, and the we have a bench here on campus, and it was painted the trans colors. And I knew coming into this, I was like, this is kind of a private college, so I don't know exactly what the community is going to be like here. And then I saw that, and I was like, whoa, that's kind of really cool. And they had a table outside of our cafeteria, with trans stickers saying, hey, write a message for trans people. And I was like, there's diversity here. There's people like me here, which was really cool to see. So when I got on campus as a freshman, my move-in day, they talked about a bunch of the different clubs, and I'd been following DOT on Instagram for a while already, so I kind of knew about it. And then I met with Camry in one of our little freshman organization events. We were painting mugs, and I met with another freshman named Salamander, and then Camry was there, and Camry was like, yeah, you guys should totally join DOT. This is going to be a good place for you. She's like, meetings are at 4 o'clock on Mondays, and I was like, I can do that. That's easy. And so I showed up to the meetings. I showed up side work, but I showed up and they were really inclusive. They were like, yeah, what's your name? What are your pronouns? How's your day been? And so it felt like home immediately. Plus we meet in Pastor Andy's office, and he's just such a lovely guy, which is incredible considering I was a little nervous with him being a pastor, but he is so wonderful. He's our club sponsor basically. So yeah, when I walked in, he was like, what's your name? What's your pronouns? I was like, this is kind of my place. So I've been going to DOT meetings weekly since the beginning of the school year.
So what had you choose Morningside for a school? Did you know that there was anything like that happening before you started going to school there?
So no, I didn't. What made me choose is when we had our college fair, I had a friend who was like, yeah, this guy, he was a part of band. He was like, they reached out to me because I'm a part of band. you should come and look at it because I've got a theater scene and I know you're really into theater. So we went up together. As I was kind of like looking around, there was like safe space flags all over. So that was kind of my first like little like, oh, okay, wait a minute. It's not just like a stereotypical like private colleges. But yeah, I picked Morningside because like the college fair, and then they had a theater scene, and I saw our theater, and our theater at the time had a pride flag just in the window. There's now like 8. I love Taylor Clemens, who's our theater guy. But I saw the pride flag and was like, the theater is definitely going to be a safe space for me, especially because there's that pride flag there. My community's there, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, again, I did not know until I met Camry that the college really was so open and inclusive. And so
Yeah.
that's really it's a pretty huge deal. Like you said, I mean, is it considered a Catholic college?
It is considered, I believe, a Lutheran college, but like
Okay.
very loosely.
Okay. What had you choose Morningside for your coursework?
So, like I said, I came up for that visit day, and it was like one of the big visit days. It wasn't like a personal one. And David Elder, who's one of the English professors here on campus, was talking. Oh, sorry, Methodist. I can never remember. that's on me. But
Thanks, Aaron. We appreciate that.
he's one of the English professors here on campus. He was talking about one of the May terms they did, and he just spoke with it with such high praise. And he was an English professor that I was like, oh my goodness, I'm in love. And it's such a pretty campus. So when I was turning around, I was like, oh my gosh, this is really pretty, and it's not too far from home. But yeah, the English community really like, I was like, whoa, people here who actually care about like writing as a career and are going to encourage me to do stuff like that. So yeah. And then the
Yeah.
theater aspect.
Well, and you bring something up that I think is really important to note, because there are so many people that when they talk to folks like us, it's almost like our identities take the forefront. And so what's unfortunate is that we are more than just the people that we happen to be in regard to that LGBTQIA2S plus initialism, right? So
Yeah.
here's the thing that I want to ask you, since I have this opportunity to kind of delve a little deeper into Sal's life. I promise none of the question. If you don't want to answer a question, feel free to say, yeah, I don't want to answer that.
Okay.
But I'm just curious if you can tell me, have you always known that you were someone who fit somewhere in that initialism?
So I have a pretty lucky kind of bringing up experience. My family has always been pretty supportive, like my immediate family. So my mom is actually bi herself. So when I went to middle school and one of my friends came out as trans, I was like, huh, I've never really thought about that. And I kind of thought about it myself, and I was like, you know what? I don't think I just like men, because I had a boyfriend at the time. I was like, you know what? I think I'm bi. And so when I told my mom was like, me too. You like that? This isn't a big deal. And I was like, oh. Then she's like, yeah, your older sister's also bi, honey. And I was like, oh. So I've pretty much always known that I was a little in the sexuality aspect, not just straight. When it came to gender, that happened during COVID. Like for a lot of people, the pandemic hit, and I was stuck in a room for 24 hours a day, kind of questioning myself. And I was like, my dead name doesn't feel right. The she, her, it doesn't feel right. And I had a friend questioning their gender at the time too. And I was like, you ever feel like this? And they were like, yeah, that's kind of why I'm going by the non-binary label now. And I was like, I'll look into that. And then I did some research on some like labels. Non-binary was the one that I thought fit me the best. And I like did some stuff on like, I looked for a new name, and Saline was the name I picked. And yeah, so I went to Pride that year, and with like had a non-binary pride flag on, and oh man, I've always known a little bit, but
Yeah. What does it mean to you to be able to be your authentic self in spaces?
it means it's very important to be able to like not be hiding behind like she, her, which is funny way of phrasing that, but like someone referring to me as she, her kind of feels like they're calling me the wrong name, or they're mispronouncing my name. And it kind of hurts. So being able to be me and be like, yeah, I use they them pronouns, and for people to use they them pronouns, it's like a glove, which is a very stereotypical metaphor, or cliche, I suppose. But it feels right, and to be able to do that in a space where I wasn't sure I was going to be able to really means a lot to me. So I have a
Yeah.
lot of people who are supporting me here, and like all of my professors use my pronouns, and like if they mess up, they're always like, sorry. And like I get so much support from my professors, which I was a little surprised at. I emailed one of them. I was like, "Hey, just so you're aware, you've been misgendering me in class, and that kind of hurts." And he was like, "I am so sorry. Call me out on it in class next time. I'm working on fixing this, and I haven't been misgendered since." He really worked on it, and it meant a lot to
Oh,
me.
well, I mean, that means a lot to all of us. So I have an interesting question. I don't know if anybody's asked you this before, but what if someone referred to you with male pronouns, he, him? Would that
So
bother you?
that's a really funny one. So I'm actually there was okay when I first came out as non-binary. I had a little kind of like system where I would wear bracelets that one was blue, one was orange, and one was pink. And I would prefer those terms. So like handsome or versus like pretty, I suppose. And then I wore the blue one for a couple weeks straight. And my friends were like, "Hey, you're kind of wearing the like masculine leaning one a lot. Like something you want to tell me?" And I was like, "No, but honestly, like the he, him pronouns, I don't mind them that much. I just, they're not like, they're not me, but they're not bad. I like them. I prefer more
Yeah.
masculine terms anyway. So
Yeah, see, and that's why I put he, they, because I'm totally fine with he, him. I'm totally fine with the reference of sir. I don't necessarily like that moniker. I don't really
mhm.
like, I don't like, I mean, I don't know any female friends who like to be ma'amed, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's just interesting to me because I feel very much the same way. I'm not at all okay with the female references. Like they just make me feel icky. I don't know why
Yeah.
that is. And it's not because I hate that part of me because I am two spirits. So I believe that I'm both and masculine and feminine and possess them both, but I just guess I feel like what honors me the most is to be referred to as he, him, or they, them.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I'm hearing you say and
Yeah.
in what honors you most. So tell me, what does dignity look like to you?
That's a really good question. So dignity is kind of, ooh, that's, hold on, let me think about this one for a second. Dignity is like, I don't know, just the ability to kind of have respect for yourself is kind of how I see it. The ability to have respect for yourself and for others to have respect for you. Um, yeah.
I like that. I mean, that makes great sense. And so here's the other thing that I think is really one of the reasons why I wanted to do these interviews and have these conversations with you folks who are younger than myself. Okay, so and I think that I have not met yet a trans or non-binary, gender non-conforming, or two-spirit person who hasn't really inspired me, right? Because y'all are up to some big stuff, and so I'm really super appreciative of that. But I think one of the things that ends up happening because of the way in which politics weaponizes our identities and religious organizations will weaponize our identities, not all of them, but some of them, the majority of them, if we're being honest. And,
Yeah.
I'm going to be frank about it because that's the way I am. But where do you find joy?
In like, just like in general, like, or
What's the first thing that comes to your mind? Because see, we hear an awful lot about the tragedy, but
mhm,
I'm
okay.
interested in where do you find joy? What do you wish people understood about you?
Okay, yeah. So when you first said that, I was like my friends. So I have a really strong friend group here on campus, and a lot of us are not that cis het label. There's a couple of us, but there's a lot of us that are not that cis het label. And so whether it be gender nonconforming or not just straight, it's those people provide support for me on a daily basis, and they don't even know how much they're doing. But so them really writing is another place I find joy. I get to write a lot about, as I said, I'm an English major and going into my creative writing path. We had this thing where we turned in 1,000 words for fiction every Monday with our creative writing professor. We're on to poetry now, but with that, I was like, man, I love Brendan. He's my professor. But he is a cishet guy, so I'm not sure he's going to be able to understand some of this stuff I'm like kind of turning in. And I turned in a really sappy kind of lesbian love story, and he was like, "I really love this. I really understood," and he got it. So with all of like the tragedy I feel like we talk about in writing, being able to like write positive stuff about like the LGBTQ community and just to have people understand it. Like I turned that piece in, and I turned a couple other pieces in for like workshop where like our peers reviewed it, and none of them had anything bad to say about it in general. Like just like, and it was scary because I was like, this is a class that is a mix of people. Some of them are English majors, some of them aren't, some of them are upperclassmen, some of them aren't. I don't know what the opinion's going to be here, but no one had a negative thing to say about the content of the story. There's a couple grammar issues, but none of them had a negative issue to say with anything about that piece. So being able to like do stuff like that brings me a lot of joy.
Well, I have some comma issues and some grammar issues, so I feel
Me
you.
too.
I
I
feel
use
you on
too
that
many.
one. I do not know where some of the commas go. Like for some reason, I just am like, I'll just guess, and then I'm like still wrong. Like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
trying to include them, but I'm still wrong. So I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the breakdown is there for me. But you know, something that you just shared that really strikes to kind of to the heart of the matter is this. We have a sense because of the ways in which we've been conditioned that when we do share things about ourselves and our lives and the things that light us up and inspire us, that people won't get it. But what you so clearly just illustrated with your professor is that, hey, he got it because everyone understands a common theme around love.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
so I think that this is another reason why I do some of the stuff that I do in regard to having conversations and asking those questions and diving deeper into understanding people is we find these streams of commonalities, right? These strings of commonalities, and we start to see one another as human beings with the feelings and emotions and desires and dreams, all these things, and they're all the same. Like we're not the scary boogeyman that we get painted out, you know, boogeymen that we get painted out to be, or boogie people. Although, hey, I don't mind a little boogie sometimes.
Exactly.
Right? So when it comes to Morningside College, can you tell me, is there anything that you wish that they would do differently? Like, I love that you've had such a powerfully positive experience, you know, going there and with your professors really working on being treating you with dignity and respect and correcting themselves. I think it's beautiful that they're doing that. But is there any places where you feel like they could do better?
I just always think there can be more. Like, we have our dot club where we do a lot of stuff, but no one that's more for people who are in that community. And sure, we have like some allies that are definitely are big supporters of us come and like help us with all those events and stuff. But that's always very minimal turnout from like allies and stuff. I just always think there can be more. We could bring more like awareness, that kind of stuff. We kind of get emails that are like, "Oh, we're doing a safety space," but the turnout for those is always really low. So I just always think that like there could be, you know, more work on putting emphasis on those things and giving more opportunities to learn. Because that's something a lot of this campus I feel like could definitely use is learning about these identities that they're not necessarily familiar with. Because a lot of people here came from a small Midwest town, so they don't have much experience with that. And I just think it'd be really nice to see more opportunities to learn.
Yeah, well, you know, I'd be happy to come up and do a half day workshop and see if we can get some folks in there. But you're also speaking to another problem that I think is somewhat systemic, and that is that when we do things where we are educating folks and when we are taking the time to do so, and in many cases for a long time I did all of those things without compensation. So I was
Hmm.
providing this kind of training and information and uplifting knowledge and awareness at my own at a cost to me, right? Now, when I started to do it and I was like, "You know what? I'm just gonna start doing these trainings." That's kind of how Speaking of Happy evolved into doing these half-day workshops where I would open it up to anyone and I'd be like, "Hey, look, this is the 101. If you want to understand what all those letters mean, if you want to understand how to create an open and affirming space for people like me and like you, come to this training. And it was pretty successful. And then the pandemic struck. But
Yeah.
it's like getting people to actually show up in the room. We have tons of people who say, "Oh my gosh, I support you. I love you. It's great. I want you to be, lead a successful and beautiful life." And but then they get kind of dismissive because they say things like, "Well, love is love." And it's like, it's more than that.
It really
Or
is.
or they say things like, "Why can't people just let people just live?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know why, but I think a lot of it has to do with a general misunderstanding about who we are as people,
Yeah.
right?" So let me ask you this. What are you going to do with your degree? And do you think you will use your degree to continue to shift people's mindset through your writing and through your own poetry and some of the things that you're doing?
Yes. So that is one of the big things that I was planning to do. So I want to go into like being an author, which is kind of like big goals, but or yeah. So it's author stuff. I'm currently working on a novel that I'm trying to write. Long process, but the main character is non-binary, and I just think
Yeah.
little representation, and that's not little in any mean of the word, but it's like representation we don't get to see. It doesn't matter. Like them being non-binary is not the main part of the story at all. And I think we need more things like that where representation is just there. It doesn't have to be, oh man, this is like this whole character's like plot is like, oh, they're non-binary. It can just be they are a character who is non-binary, and I want to do stuff like that. And those stories about them being non-binary, they need to be told too. But I think it'd be a lot easier to have access to some of like the representation, and just I think it would make things a lot easier to see if we see more of that.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you. It seems like non-binary characters, trans characters, gay and lesbian characters, bisexual like we always play kind of the second string. We're
Yeah.
not necessarily the main course,
Yeah,
right?
it's always you're the gay funny side friend that doesn't have a
Right.
main plot, but you're there. You're comedy.
Right. Right. Or you're the trans person who's there, but there's nothing really, there's no story around you as a trans person. There's been some great shows that have included trans characters
Mhm.
and included them in a way that was normalized to a certain degree, right? So
Yeah.
the focus isn't on the fact that the character is trans as much as it's just life as a trans person, like
Yeah.
I can't think of it right now. The name of the show, is it Good Trouble? No. There's a show right now that has a character in the first season, and that character has kind of come back a few times. It's a trans woman. Her
Okay.
brother is one of the central characters on the show, but I know in the first season they focused a lot on her and familial relationships, and she's
Mm.
also a person of color. So it was really, it was really great to watch, but it's like again, it's not like a central character to
Yeah.
the show. So I think it's wonderful that you want to, write a novel and that you want to have a central character who is non-binary, and I hope that you continue to pursue that. I'm gonna keep talking to you. We're waiting for our next guest who I haven't seen show up, who hasn't popped up here yet, which is totally fine. We'll just keep talking until they show
Okay.
up. Um,
I'm cool
but,
with that.
yeah, so let me ask you, what do you wish more people understood about who you are as a non-binary person?
That's a really good question. I think I wish more people understood that, like, I'm not doing it just because, like, there's a reason I use they, them pronouns and am actively like, hey, they, them, not she, her. And it's not just to be different. It hurts to be called like she, her and not be myself. And I think quite a few people don't understand that.
Yeah, what do you think might be kind of at the crux of that, of their not understanding it?
I think a lot of it is just not being aware of like what being non-binary is and not quite understanding that like I see gender as like a spectrum and them seeing it as you're here or there.
Yeah.
And I think just even a little bit of like I said before, like education and just a little bit of like opening your mind and being like, yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be one way or the other. We're very diverse people, and humans were never meant to fit in a box, in my opinion. And so to give us a box for something as silly as gender kind of feels a little ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. And I like that because I get, I've heard this as well in the past, not as much so now. People kind of are at the point where they're seeing me, but there's something about not being seen, heard, honored, and affirmed. There's just something about that I think
Yeah.
is like, when people show up in my life, I see them for who they are. I want to honor them for who they tell me they are, and I want to treat them with dignity and respect. Now, if they are doing things that harm other people, then I have to draw a line, right? And I have
Mhm.
to make a choice whether or not I'm going to say something to them about what they're saying that is a little problematic,
Yeah.
right? So I'm going to be that guy that's going to point out to them that hey, what they're doing is take a little bit of an issue with it. So, I like that you're willing and that you're also in an environment at the college that supports you being able to speak up for yourself. What
Yeah.
would you say to someone who maybe doesn't have that, maybe not within their family? A lot of the folks that tune into my show are young people. And what would you say to them when they're, 10, 12, 13, and they know that they're non-binary or they know that they're trans, but they don't have supportive family and friends, but they find this podcast and they're watching this live stream or this stream later after it's been recorded because it'll be
Yeah.
out there. What would you say to them as they're watching?
The most important thing, be safe, but the thing is you're not alone. There's older people, which is what I really struggled with when I was younger, is being like, man, this kind of feels like a my generation thing. Maybe I am just faking this. But seeing people like me and like you, Eli, there's people out there who understand what you're going through, and there's going to be support for you somewhere. You might have to do a little bit of digging, but I mean, if you're here, you've already found some of it. And even if you don't have that family that's supportive of you, sometimes it's easier to let them go and make your own families. That's kind of what I've done here, is that I have some people who aren't very supportive of me back home, but sometimes it's a lot easier when you're not alone. Find those people who are there for you and are going to support you and will do whatever it takes to be on your side because they love you for who you are and understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things that has been kind of around since probably the beginning of time is what we call chosen family,
Mhm.
right? For those cultures and traditions that didn't necessarily acknowledge or honor folks who are LGBTQ plus. I know that within my indigenous communities back before colonization and forced assimilation, they held folks like me in high regard.
Yeah.
And so you were considered if someone like me was born into a family, your whole family would have been considered blessed. And so I would love to see us get back to a point where that's how we're treating people like you, even non-binary folks who are not people of color are just as valuable and important in our world as folks who are non-binary and also people of color. It's just understanding that those intersections of identities can add additional um, difficulty to living one's life.
Yeah. We have
So,
different stories we can tell with what we've experienced.
yeah, absolutely. Well, we're waiting for our next guest to come. You might end up being on here for another, I don't know, 20 minutes.
Hey, I've got nothing to do today. I finished all my classes for the day.
Hey, look at you all being an overachiever. Let me see if I'm looking to see who this next person was that we were interviewing. Was it Salamander or Lucas? Who was going to be second after you? Camry sent me the list of people, and then when I talked to her earlier, it was like you, although you were listed third on the list, Sal, you were supposed to be on last according to that list, but
Oh, okay.
I think that list is wrong. So I'm going to try to.
It's possible.
Well, that is. Let's see. Salamander Ingle, is that the next person?
That sounds right.
Yeah, I'm trying to get that going here, but that's okay. We'll just keep talking. If you're good.
Alrighty, I'm good.
So tell me a little bit more about the organization on campus and what all do you folks do?
So it is not just an LGBTQ diversity; it's a overall diversity. So I believe we do a weekly kind of book reading. So this year's book, I can't actually remember what it's called, but it's talking about disabled like awareness. We're talking about ADA stuff on campus here because we have a lot of buildings that aren't that accessible. So that's something we're really trying to focus on here. Another thing is we were talking about Hispanic Heritage Month. This week we've been kind of really hitting it heavy with like the trans remembrance week and stuff. So we're going to do like a vigil. There's going to be a movie screening. We just painted, like I said, our bench, which is like a really big thing, the trans colors. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that happens with Dot. Dot does a lot of just diversity stuff in general. One thing is like there is a very big event that Morningside does for all of the clubs, which is called Into the Streets. So you get your kind of club together and then you go volunteer. There's no classes that day. It's a very like important thing. So we did that at the beginning of the school year. I think that was like in October. So not really beginning of the school year, but we went to the Humane Society here and we made little bags to help them with one of their fundraisers because that's their main way of making money because they're also a nonprofit. So we did that. We were talking about the film screening that happened last month. We were trying to get like support for that because that had a bunch of different cultural films that happened in that. It was a very short thing, or not a very short thing. It was a bunch of short films that were screened. And so a lot of them had a lot of different cultural impacts. So we were trying to get people to go to that, just stuff like that.
So what were some of the films that were being played?
There were a lot of short films. I didn't actually get to go to that because I had a different theater event going on that day. But there was like a bunch of different genres of there was like horror, comedy, like psychological thriller, like drama, like romance, and it was all like I think like 2 to 5 minute films just very quickly and to see what story you could tell in that time.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah.
So why should somebody, if they're thinking about coming to Morningside College, why should they go there?
The biggest thing is there's a community here for you, even if you don't think there is. You're going to find something somewhere, which is kind of insane. Another thing is like if you're into band or theater or music, you're going to get that attention that I feel like a lot of colleges don't give to the kind of fine arts stuff. Yeah, stuff like that. There's going to be community here, and a lot of the people are really nice. Some can be really intimidating at first, but they're really nice. I just also have social anxiety, so that might be why they're intimidating. But there's so many lovely people.
Well, yeah, and I think that new environments can actually be intimidating to a lot of people, right? Especially if you're saying, like you're saying, a lot of folks who maybe have grown up in small towns, coming into a bigger town, and then being around a lot of people and being exposed to things that maybe they weren't exposed to before. That can all be really super overwhelming, like first time living away from home, like all of those things can be incredibly overwhelming. So, what inspires you?
This is a very similar answer to what gives me joy, but my friends, a lot of them are from very different backgrounds to myself. And to see what they've gone through and like are still persevering, like my roommate Susanna, she is so lovely. But she has gone through so much in her life, and here she is like being in our education major, which is like a huge major. I've known her since we were in middle school, so she's not someone I met here, but she gives me so much inspiration every day because she took a not great living situation where she was kind of in charge of her family, and she is now going on and being her own person, and to see that brings me so much joy and inspiration. It's like Susanna's persevering, I'm gonna persevere. It's just it's so lovely.
Exactly. So what would you have to say what would you say about the, state of kind of our nation? Like, where do you stand in regard to, politics and voting and that, you know, that path?
Yeah, number one thing, vote. Like, it doesn't matter what party you're voting for, vote. It's very important. That's your chance to like do stuff. Vote. That's very important. I feel like our nation is in a very kind of tricky spot. We've definitely progressed more than like we have progress that has been made. If it's the amount of progress that should have been made in that time, maybe not. But
Mm,
there's progress being made, so we're not in a self-defeating cycle of man, no progress is being made, I'm suffering, no progress is being made, I'm suffering.
mm.
But there's definitely a lot more we could be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. You know what? It looks like we got a couple of more of our peeps with us. There's
Lucas,
Lucas.
Yeah,
Hey, hey. And we have
Mander.
Mander. Mander, you got to turn shut those shades behind you. We can't see your face.
yeah,
There we go. Well, Sal, you are welcome to hang out here a little bit longer with us. We're gonna be
All right.
we're gonna be streaming for about another 20 minutes, and then I'm gonna have to hop off 15, 20 minutes. But I did want to talk a little bit more about just in general. I'll just toss this out to everybody because Sal has already kind of answered the question. What do you feel that Morningside College is doing right when it comes to our community? And I'll just ask that question first. What do you feel they're doing right?
I can go first. I think I've had the best experience with professors, and it really seems to me that professors really try to understand and work to improve themselves and their education. We have safe zone trainings um, on campus that are offered by our DEI committee, and I have been to one. I went to one last year, and a lot of professors and staff were there. So I recognize that professors are really putting in the effort to understand students, and every good experience I've had um, has been with a professor who, whenever I say this is my name, these are my pronouns, they say, okay, we will work with that. Or whenever I bring up something that maybe someone said in the classroom that was disrespectful, they are completely understanding, and they sort of take action and make sure that the dialogue in the classroom is safe and open. And so I think what Morningside does right is, I would say, in their professors in the hiring process of making sure it's open-minded people who are willing to recognize that the students are what make the campus. And if students aren't comfortable, if students are happy, the campus is not going to progress.
Yeah.
And students are really what contribute to the progression of the overall school.
Wow. Why do you think that is? Do you think is leadership very are they proactively saying to potential new hires that, hey, this is an open and inclusive campus. We are treating students with dignity and respect, and we are going to expect you to kind of fall in line? Are they doing that? Or is it just that what are they doing to make it more inclusive?
I think definitely the encouragement of attending safe zones and making those available is a really big step, because I think it can sometimes be hard for students to have to bear the brunt of professor education. But when the DEI committee takes a charge in that, so it's kind of professionals who are more established in that area and that education, and they're using programs from organizations, it takes the brunt of it off the students, because sometimes that can be a little difficult. So I definitely think they make an effort to make sure. I can't honestly speak to that. Obviously, I've never been involved in a hiring process, but I think it's definitely very encouraged that professors attend safe zone trainings and educate themselves. And I think professors are encouraged by other professors, their colleagues,
Right.
to really put in that effort to understand how important diversity and inclusion and student engagement is to the success of the university.
Yeah, absolutely. Mander, what do you have to say about that?
Really, I've got nothing on that subject yet, as I haven't had much experience with people on campus. I'm kind of a guy who goes in and out of class and then just kind of disappears. But yeah, I have noticed, like what Lucas said, that the professors are really responsive and respectful, and they do have a hand in making sure that everyone feels safe and comfortable and respected.
That's great. So are either of you willing to share what you feel Morningside could be doing better?
I can. And these are issues that Morningside is actively working on.
Well, that's great.
Especially with our new president, who has really made an effort of including diversity, equity, and inclusion in his goals for the university. And I think what is a common struggle among many people in colleges and institutions is housing. Housing can be kind of difficult, but I think that's a very common experience. But sometimes there were some difficulties running through that. But that is something, even with the group that me, Mander, and Celine are in, that is something we are involved in the process of making the housing and res life easier to understand, more open communication, and more education. And I think that's something the university president is really trying to work on, because that's issues I have raised with him in private meetings I've had, and he's very open to that, and he understands what that can look like and how difficult that can be. But I think that is one of the biggest issues, trans and non-binary, because housing is a part, and feeling safe in your own room and having a place where you feel safe is part of being honored as a trans person. Is while maybe you can't be fully responsible for a classroom setting, but you should be able to fully control where you sleep, where you feel comfortable dressing and expressing yourself at the end of the day, when you don't want to have to worry about a stressful housing situation.
So what is the campus already providing for folks who are transgender, non-binary, or gender diverse in way of housing?
I know that we have apartments on campus. I know Mander lives in one that have private bathrooms, and they give you the option of having a roommate. Like for me, I have a private bathroom, and they asked if I wanted a roommate, or if I ever found somebody that I would like to room with, and they never put a roommate on me. They always left it up to me. I know this isn't a universal experience, but I know that was really what contributed to my coming to Morningside, and making sure at the end of the day, I have a space that I feel comfort, and, I can just unwind, and I don't have to worry about uncomfortable situations like that.
Right. Mander, what do you have to say about that, since you are in housing that is, I'm assuming it was designed to have you feel comfortable. Is that the case?
It is and it isn't. I'm in one of the apartments mainly not because I am transgender, but because I have an ESA animal who is a rabbit. And mainly one of the biggest things that they said when I was signing up for housing was that it was an option to be put in an apartment, but they kind of made it clear that it was more for an ESA rather than my comfort via my gender, because originally there was supposed to be a gender inclusive floor over in like Dimmitt, I think it was, and they had been telling me that that was where I was going to go, and they only put me in the apartment like a week maybe before orientation. So yeah, I don't really know how that worked. I like to think that they were trying to be inclusive of like my comfort, but I think in the end it was more about a disability accommodation than anything.
Right. Do you feel like, are you comfortable where you are? Are you happy with
Yeah.
where you are?
Yeah, the apartments are a really great place to live, especially if you have insecurities with your, body like I do, because I do have more space for myself. I do have a private bathroom, and it is really comfortable for me. So it's a good experience. Yeah.
Oh, I'm happy to hear that. It's always nice to be able to hear positive stories. I mean, a lot of times what we hear are negative stories about the way that we're treated out in the world, and in the communities that we interact with. So it's nice to know that you all are experiencing a space where you do feel more open and affirmed for who you are and treated with dignity and respect. So I asked Sal, as I was talking to them earlier, to share a little bit, and we're going to have to probably wrap up here in about 8 minutes because I have to hop onto something else, and then I'll come back and complete some interviews this afternoon. So if Lucas or Mander, if you want to hop back on later, you can do that as well. But Lucas, what are you studying? And Mander, same thing. What are you studying, and what are you hoping to do with that degree?
I am a senior English major, and I write a lot about feminist perspective, gender theory, queer theory, and I've really explored the history behind literature. A lot of our literature classes are, historical, and I plan on going into the publishing business, and I really hope to bring more diversity into publishing because it's heavily white, it's heavily cis female, and I hope that I can just bring my own experience in that, since I've seen so many books that clearly did not run by a trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming person that really should have, and it shows either an unhealthy representation, it perpetuates dangerous stereotypes. So I really want to make sure that the literature that's being put out there that a lot of, young people are consuming is affirming and doesn't make them feel insecure or like they are a dangerous stereotype. And I want to be able to bring that perspective and also hopefully act as an encouragement to my fellow trans people, non-binary people, that it is possible to go into workplaces where they may not traditionally have been welcomed and say, we can do this. We belong in these places and there's no reason we should not enter them.
Yeah, absolutely. Mander, what about you?
I am a double major of criminal justice and psychology. And one of my main focuses is I want to use these fields to go into crime analysis, basically to study the statistics of crime, especially against trans and queer individuals. I want to see why we experience crime at a higher level, especially sex crimes. What is being done to prevent that? What is being done to help that? And like, what is the psychology of offenders who target transgender people?
Wow, what inspired you to do that? What had you choose that as a direction?
I've always been interested in psychology as someone who basically has the DSM-5 on his medical chart. I've always wanted to know why the brain works, why people do things the way they do it. Human behavior has always been an interesting field to me. Crime, I've been an activist for years, and when you experience hate crimes, or you experience friends who experience hate crimes, or you deal with sexual assault in your time, inevitably, if you have a brain like me, you focus on it and you hyperfixate on it. And I always wanted to find a way to either prevent it or find ways of helping people get through it, and just focusing on the statistics of it and the math side of it, allowing yourself to put people into numbers helps it feel less personal, but it is really more, I've always just had a personal connection, and I never want any of my kids who I ran a GSA with to ever experience these crimes. So I want to do my part to try to prevent them.
Yeah, and I think it's so beautiful that you're choosing that direction in that field, because I know for myself, and some of the research that I hope maybe you can be a part of, is why many times hate crimes against us, like they go unreported or underreported. I can tell you, I've had a number of friends who have experienced really horrible crimes against them, but they don't report them because they don't feel as though they're going to be treated with dignity and respect, or that the judicial system is actually going to provide them with the kind of support that they need.
Yeah. A big problem with the current system we have right now is that it is not fully equipped or prepared to deal with transgender individuals. So many times, especially in like court documents, people will be misgendered and dead named just because they don't feel like they have to care enough to just put in parentheses their real name or pronouns, because it's a step that most people are unwilling or to take, or they just simply don't know how important it is.
Yeah.
And most people leave these unreported because, frankly, systemic oppression and this pressure that we get to stay silent, be brave, not be a problem minority, it causes a lot of people to, especially with sex crimes, just keep it under the radar. Especially with hate crimes, you're actually not supposed to call your local police department. There is a FBI unit agency that is specified on hate crimes, but
Wow.
almost no one knows that you're supposed to report to them, not to your local PD, which then causes these crimes to be reported but then undertreated,
Yes.
because they're treated like any other offense and not as a felony, which is what a hate crime is.
Well, I need to get that information from you, because I think that kind of information should be known more widespread within our community, because like I said, I have a number of people I know who have been harmed. I had a good buddy who was down in the old market in Omaha here, and in a restaurant, and ended up going outside and literally getting beat up
Yeah.
and bloodied, and ended up having to go to the ER. And I don't think to this day that their case has been resolved,
Right. No,
because you're
especially,
right. The local police, they acted like it was no big deal. They actually did not even take the person who did it into custody that night. They let the guy go. I mean, treated my friend like he was the criminal, and he's trans. I mean, he's also a black trans man. That's going to add to it. So I would love to get that information from you, because I think it's really important to share that. But it is 12:31, and I do have to hop off here because I have to be on another call at 12:45. But I will be back after that at 1:30. We're going to be doing some more interviews. So Lucas and Mander, if you want to come back, not that I don't like you, Sal.
I was here a little bit.
Yeah, you were here for a little bit, but I would love it if Lucas and Mander, if you both could come back. I'm going to end this broadcast, and I'll send out a new link to where we'll be. But thank you so much, all three of you, for joining me here this morning and having this conversation. Again, this is Eli with Speaking of Happy, special episode, interviewing some folks from Morningside College. We will be back at 1:30 to continue these conversations. Thank you to those who tuned in, but we'll be back shortly.